In this video, we will tell you about the Vikings. Vikings were early medieval Scandinavian mariners who made sea voyages from Vinland to Biarmia and North Africa. They were mostly tribes in the decomposition stage of the tribal system, living in the territory of modern Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, who were pushed outside their home countries by overpopulation and starvation. From about 800 until the 11th century, huge numbers of Scandinavians left their native lands in search of happiness elsewhere. These maritime warriors, known collectively as Vikings or Normans, began with raids on coastal areas, the Baltic, northern Russia, and especially the unprotected monasteries in the British Isles, where the most gold was available. Over the next 3 centuries, they would leave their mark as pirates, raiders, traders, and settlers over much of Britain and the north of the European continent, as well as in parts of present-day Russia, Iceland, France, Sicily, Greenland, and Canada. Contrary to some popular notions of Vikings, they were not a race, so not every Scandinavian was a Viking and not every Viking was a Scandinavian. However, their gangs usually consisted of countrymen from the same villages and towns, but sometimes took in adventurers from other places. Most of the Vikings whose activities are best known come from what is now known as Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, though historical records also include mentions of Finnish, Estonian, and Sami Vikings. Their common ground in what distinguishes them from the European peoples they encountered was that they came from a foreign country, they were not civilized in the local sense of the word, and, most importantly, they were not Christian. Scandinavian furs were highly prized in the new trading markets. Trade with Europeans allowed the Scandinavians to learn about new sailing technology, as well as the growing wealth and attendant internal conflicts between European kingdoms. The Viking predecessors, the pirates who hunted merchant ships in the Baltic Sea, used this knowledge to expand their pursuit of fortune in the North Sea and beyond. In 793 AD, an attack on Lindisfarne Monastery off the coast of Northumberland in northeastern England ushered in the Viking Age. The perpetrators, probably Norwegians who crossed the North Sea, did not destroy the monastery completely, but the attack shook the European religious world to its core. Unlike other groups, these strange new invaders had no respect for religious institutions such as monasteries, which were often left unguarded and vulnerable off the coast. 2 years later, Viking raids struck at the unprotected island monasteries of Skye and Iona in the Hebrides, as well as Rathlin off the northeast coast of Ireland. The first recorded raid in continental Europe occurred in 799 on the island monastery of St. Philibert at Noirmoutier, near the mouth of the Loire River. For several decades, the Vikings limited their raids to coastal targets in the British Isles, especially Ireland, and Europe. The trading center of Dorstad, 80 kilometers from the North Sea, became a frequent target after 830. They then took advantage of internal conflicts in Europe to expand their activities inland. After the death of Louis the Pious, Emperor of Francia, modern France and Germany, in 840 his son Lothar actually invited the Viking fleet to support him in a struggle for power with his brothers. Meanwhile, Viking armies remained active on the European continent during the 9th century, violently sacking Nantes, on the French coast, in 842 and attacking such cities as Paris, Limoges, Orleans, Tours, and Nîmes. In 844 the Vikings stormed Seville, then under Arab control. In 859 they sacked Pisa, though the Arab fleet defeated them on their way back north. In 911 the West Frankish king by treaty granted Rouen and the surrounding territories to a Viking leader named Rollo in exchange for the latter denying other raiders passage to the Seine. This region in northern France is now known as Normandy, or Land of the North. In the 9th century, Scandinavians, mostly Norwegians, began colonizing Iceland, an island in the North Atlantic where no one had yet settled in large numbers. By the end of the 10th century, some Vikings, including the famous Eric the Red, moved even further west, to Greenland. According to later Icelandic histories, some of the first Viking settlers in Greenland, presumably led by the Viking hero Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, may have been the first Europeans to discover and explore North America. Naming their landing place Vinland, Grape Land, they built a temporary settlement at Lanceaux Meadows in present-day Newfoundland. The events of 1066 in England ended the Viking Age. By that time, all the Scandinavian kingdoms were Christian, and what was left of the Viking culture was absorbed into the culture of Christian Europe. Today, signs of Viking heritage can be found mainly in the Scandinavian origin of some hydronyms and toponyms in the areas in which they settled, including northern England, Scotland, and Russia. In Iceland, the Vikings left an extensive literature, the Icelandic sagas, in which they celebrated the greatest victories of their glorious past. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel.